Well, hello there, my dear children of the apocalypse. How are we doing today? Welcome back to our Doomtime podcast. And my guest today is our first Swedish person, my mysterious Swede, as we'd like to call you back in the day. I mean, we go back, wow, to the beginnings of War Thunder, I want to say 2016, 17, 18. And then we sort of both disappeared. I mean, you went your own way. I sort of still lingered around the War Thunder community. What have you been up to? And how's life treating you these days?
Wow, I've since last time I've been up to quite a lot of different things, really. I have well, for those who don't know me, my name is Simon. I am a former War Thunder content creator, but now I am an officer in the Swedish Marines. So I've kind of completely just hopped off that War Thunder path that I was on for a while. Um, but I quit. Well, I say quit, but I pretty much quit War Thunder. I would say 2019, due to a lot of different reasons, really. But the main one being going back to the military. And ever since 20 about summer of 2019, I have been in the Swedish military and have been doing that full time, more or less. And I've just been staying busy with doing my job and training and working out. So, a very long story short, but basically my entire life right now revolves around my military profession. So that's what it is.
Fantastic. How much would you say has your profession or the choice of profession been impacted by War Thunder? How much has the game sort of, given you the interest and with the love of tanks, planes, infantry, stories of history, and so on?
I would say originally it hasn't affected it that much, but because a lot of inspirations come like internally initially. Way back when I first applied, because for me the military has always been somewhat of an obvious choice. Um, but when I started doing my military career back in 2015, I didn't really know too much about War Thunder, but I was still like interested in all kinds of military FPS and military games in general. And then I stumbled across War Thunder, and obviously my interest for that kind of game just like shot out the roof because I'd played World of Tanks before, and that was fun. But then I tried this War Thunder game, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. Started playing War Thunder, and I think how the way that War Thunder has affected me and my like work or professional life, I think has just it's more I think it's more of a reverse role that my professional life has impacted the way I look at War Thunder.
Hmm.
It's kind of hard to explain in a way, um, but I think I look at War Thunder more of a game of tactics now more than what I used to before. Obviously, it's a video game. You can't really apply the real world tactics. But now, whenever I do, which is very rare, but when I do go back to War Thunder and try to play a couple matches, I always try to think what I've been taught. And obviously, that doesn't work because no one else thinks that way. Um, so I would say it's the other way around that's been affected more, really, that my professional life is affected War Thunder more than the other way around, to be honest.
That's a very interesting answer. Now, a standard question for me here, speaking to anybody who ever played War Thunder, is do you still play the game and why?
Um, I want to say no, and the answer is no. But every once in a while,
Mm.
I go on my games list. I'm like, oh, the game is still there, and I boot it up, and I'm like, oh, this used to be so good, and I get that itch,
Yeah.
that big itch. I just want to play a game, and I play one match, and then after that match, I realize this is why I quit. Like, sure, the match was fun, but
Mm.
there's nothing in me that's like, let's go again. Like I
Yeah.
just get that everything that I searched for before starting to play that specific match, everything I searched for, I got from that match. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done now. I don't have to play this game anymore.
Mm.
Um, and I don't really feel the need to play it anymore either. Back in the day, War Thunder for me was like, and I'm sure you can relate. It was a drug, more or less. Like
Yes.
I needed to log on every single day. Like any hour that I wasn't on War Thunder was like, oh man, what am I gonna do in War Thunder today? That was the thing that I thought of. Um, but I don't really. I don't play the game actively anymore. I might log on maybe like once every 3 months just to see what's up, and then I'm just like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah. It's it's an interesting feeling because I think so many people that still play cannot relate to it, because I know neither of us could probably relate to it in the moment, because we were, I mean, if you're not playing it, you were thinking about it. It was
Yeah.
the rush that I personally got from just opening the game, sitting in the hangar, listening to the old soundtrack that we used to have, was like, to this day. I mean, if I hear the song, pop up on my shuffle list on the phone, I just get those like, oh, the nostalgia just flowing through me. But alas, it's not the same anymore, and we sort of have moved on.
Yeah.
I'm 26. I think you're 27,
Yes,
right?
correct.
Yeah, we're moving into that second stage of the 20s and starting to think more about careers and finances and jobs and futures and families. So War Thunder, yeah, you check it out every once in a while. Is there any other games that you do still sort of get hooked up on? Maybe a single player game that you might play for a bit, or is gaming something you've really left in the past?
I don't think I'll ever be able to properly leave gaming, if I'm being honest, because it's been such a big part of me for so long. I think I started playing video games at like 7 or 8, Mario Kart on the Nintendo 64 and stuff like that. Um, but I still do play games. I absolutely do. A lot. I play a lot of FPS games. So
Hmm.
like you'll Battlefield, for example. I love the Battlefield franchise. Um, I play some of my Nintendo Switch just like to relax in the sofa or in the couch. Um, I What other games do I play? It's mostly FPS games, to be
Hmm.
honest. I picked up Destiny 2 again recently. I've played some MMORPGs like Guild Wars, World of Warcraft, and stuff like that, but I wouldn't necessarily say I play it as much as I used to. Before it was, every single day, but now it's like, yeah, sometimes of the week. So,
Yeah, other obligations getting in the way.
yep, absolutely.
I was thinking of questions to ask you, and I'm going to put you a bit on the spot because for me, the topic of the army is actually a bit of a, how should I say, I'm a bit torn on the subject. On one hand, I'm of the opinion that, we don't need army, we don't need people that, go into other countries and shoot each other in the face. But then the more I read, the more I listen to various sources, the more I realize that, one of the most important things that we have and what a country needs to have is a way to protect itself. And that's where I cannot, you know, disregard the importance of having an army and a local one. How do you view, or rather, how would you sell to me the idea of the army? What has it given you? What do you see it for Sweden as your country and for the world? The importance. What's your take on that?
Oh, that's a big question.
It's a very loaded one, I know.
I think and this is such a hard question to answer in a way because for me it's always been such an obvious thing
Hmm.
because I have a lot of family history. Um, but for me, it's always been about like protecting the people around you, not necessarily um, everyone that's like super far away. But for me, it's always been so obvious. Like, okay, the reason I do this is for my family,
Hmm.
or for my closest friends, or for my family that live up north. And when people ask me why I joined the military, it's usually because of family reasons. Because if something happens, I want to know what I can do, how I'm supposed to do it, and where I'm supposed to do it, and like how I can contribute to a safer society, and especially being able to protect my family. Um, the whole idea of a military, like a military presence. I know for a lot of people it is a very like what's the word? Um, it's a very like talked about subject, like a bit of a controversial subject
Hmm.
because some people are on the side that we shouldn't need or we shouldn't have militaries, and the other one is like we need to have militaries, and it's very hard to usually meet in the middle, unfortunately. But I think at the end of the day, there's this quote that goes something along the lines of like, in order to have peace, we must train for war, or something something along those lines.
Yeah.
I can't exactly remember what it is. And there's also this thing called mutually assured destruction.
Yes.
And this was a thing like during the Cold War that basically created peace because US and Russia, they were like, if you destroy us, we're going to destroy you. And they're
Mm.
like, okay, let's not destroy each other.
Yeah.
Um, and that's still a thing up until this day. That obviously, like, we are more reasonable nowadays. Like, it's more diplomatic. We talk more, but the need to always have some type of military presence is very important for um, um, what's the English word for it? To prevent something to
Mm.
happening, um, because otherwise you'll be caught in the fire without a fire extinguisher when the fire is already there, instead of being ready with a fire extinguisher, even though you might not know there's a fire coming, but if it does, you have the fire extinguisher ready.
Yeah.
But for me, it's always been a quite obvious choice, especially considering family situations and stuff.
Yeah. I like that quote which says, "It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war," right?
Yep.
And I like the way that you explained it, because what I started viewing, and perhaps what started to sway me more into this direction of, for me, military stands for discipline. It stands for, what used to be masculine, what used to be protective, what used to be this journey of pretty much every young guy to get through to a certain level where he's considered a man. Now, of course, we hope that these people won't have to go through too much, trauma. Like I say, it's preventive. It's not this desire to actually go there and fight. It's that if it did come to that, you have somebody to rely on, and so your families are actually safe. How do you view this modern world, which has been quite divided as per what it is to be a man and what it is to be disciplined and take care of your body and take care of proper nutrition? Because I'm sure that, having joined the army in Sweden, being one of those countries that I think are very well developed for this, you have obviously, changed a lot from your gaming days, and probably take care of yourself significantly better.
Yeah, I think for me, it's never been like, and it's gonna be like such a liberal answer, but like for me, it's never been like a man is this, and there's like a list of
Mm.
things a man is. It's always been more like what I as a person and what I consider myself as, and what I want to live up to, and being that of like a manly gender. For me, those are like the manly characteristics, I guess, in a way. So for me, it's always been about protecting those around you. It's always been not necessarily providing, like you're the only one that provides, but you are supposed to be able to provide for people. So say if I'm a family of four, I want to be able to provide just as much as my wife does. Now, if I do more, if I do less, that's fine. But as long as I do something to provide for the family, that's all in good. Um, but for me, it's growing up to become, I guess, what you could consider a man. The military definitely helped me, especially like with discipline and priorities, and like understanding what's important in life. I get, and it sounds very cliche and like kind of haha, I'm smarter than you kind of think, but when you're out there and it's pouring rain, you have nothing, like you have barely any food, it's life just sucks. You really realize how like some things just aren't as bad as you make them out to be. When you have food, you have shelter, you have warmth, you have people around you. And I think that has very much helped me to become the person that I am today, is the way that the military has helped me change the way I look at things. And I think it does that for a lot of people. And I think that's something a lot of military or police or whatever it could be, mountaineers can agree with me on here, is that when you're put in hard and difficult
Mm.
situations, it really changes the way that you view your normal life, or a normal life, I guess.
You start to respect sort of the everyday. I want to say it almost like it's boredom, because now,
Mm.
obviously, I've not been in the military. I don't think I ever will be, unless it's something that has to happen because we're going to war and I'm enlisted. But I spent 3 years in the professional kitchen. I spent plenty of long hours on the bike saddle, which you're going to extreme. You're going. I think most of us, we feel like there's a limit. The way in a car you have a fuel tank and then you have the reserve, and people massively misjudge both how much is in the reserve and when the reserve starts to actually get depleted. And the combination of these two really taught me that, the everyday average life of most of us here in the Western world is pretty good, And like you said, we're well fed, we're clothed, we're not cold, we have places to stay, we have loving families. And this is where I think the discipline and the, almost I want to say, the preventive trauma that the military or these types of jobs will teach you, I think in the long term would help people not to develop such a high level of perhaps anxiety, depression, fear, because, I always believe that a strong body means a strong mind. I was having this conversation the other day with a friend of mine who's, he's about as tall as me, and he weighs, I want to say 20 kilograms less. He's extremely skinny. And he was telling me how he feels a little bit lost in life, and he's got everything going for him. He's got a good career upcoming if he just puts his head down. He's got a girlfriend. Things are working out for him, but he feels like he's a bit lost, and he feels low on energy. He feels empty. And I told him, the first thing I would do if I was you is just literally hit the gym, do a couple of push-ups, just, eat a little bit more. I said, track your intake for one day, because you'll be surprised how little you actually consume. And energy has to come into your body from somewhere. It's not going to come from just, sunshine and rainbows and air. So how much of a transformation did you personally go through when you joined the army? Obviously you're not, the cliche fat American dwelling in a basement playing video games, but you and I think both have a pretty similar disposition. We're quite tall and we're quite skinny. And how did you deal with that?
Well, for me, I've always been very, very aware of my weight because I got like super super short story here, but I got bullied as a like when I was in middle school because of my weight. So I've always been super aware of my weight. Um, and when I joined the military, I obviously saw quite quickly the impact that because I've always been very physically active. I've always done sports my entire life, more or less. Um, but when I joined the military, I started seeing this upward going trend where um, obviously the more I work out and the more I eat, the more weight I put on. And it's always been like a struggle for me to put on weight for whatever reason. I eat much more than what my friends do and work out more than what my friends do, but I still don't really gain a lot of weight. So it's been a very rough journey for me to do that. But I realized when I joined the military is that um, doing all these exercises and doing all these like very unconventional exercises that you don't usually do and training your body in ways that you are not used to and putting yourself through those kind of physical challenges that is for me that's what changed my mind regarding of like how well I can perform because I wasn't by any chance like the biggest guy or the smallest guy in my platoon during basic training. Um, but I realized that you don't have to be the biggest or strongest guy to do those things because a lot of the things that you do in the military are things that you can't really train for in the regular life. So it's very hard for big people, or like when I say big, I mean like big muscular people, to come in and outperform everyone. Because usually they are the ones that struggle the most because they are used to the heavy lifts, like the big squats, the deadlifts, the bench press. But usually, when you're thrown into a military setting, none of those things really matter because everything you do is so extraordinary and so out of place that you are not used to, and it basically levels everyone out. Like everyone, in lack of better terms, everyone sucks just as much as everyone else because no one is good at doing anything. Um, and it really, for me at least, it really was a positive thing because I realized that you don't need to be that big guy that everyone like thought was, oh, that's the big buff guy, the guy that's super strong that always does well. Um, and I was like, the way that I physically can perform is perfectly fine. Now I was still like very mentally aware of my physical shape, like the way like my body weight, but I realized that how much I could still perform because I was basically just muscle and bone more or less. I
Mm-hmm.
have barely had any fat on my body, And I realized how well that actually gets me, and how much I can perform due to that. Now, obviously, ever since I started my military journey, my body weight has been increasing, and I've been putting on a bit more fat, more muscle, and everything like that, and my performance has increased quite a lot. Um, but my mental state has been kind of the same since I started the military, with the whole everyone is kind of at the same level when you join the military, because everything is so new, when you're so stressed out, everything, you're so fresh, and it's such a unique experience and a humbling experience for a lot of people.
So, I mean, I call that the sleeper build, essentially. I think both of us are quite built for endurance, essentially, right?
Hmm.
The sort of skinny, like I say, skin and bones, essentially, and a bit of muscle. But what I find is, yeah, I find it, funny with the extreme ends of fitness training, where some guys are so buff they can't even scratch their back or reach a certain point there. Um, for me, I found it, I want to say quite, it's the beach body, essentially. You start
Hmm.
going to the fitness because you want to look good. You want to be able to take your shirt off and people being like, oh, wow, for the ladies, if not for other things. Um, but it's interesting to me that you say that your mental state hasn't changed that much, which would lead me to believe that you entered with a healthy mindset already, that you entered with this baseline, which you knew, that you were prepared for it. You weren't entering something that you were unaware you would be able to complete, right? You went into the army with this kind of big picture in mind, and you knew you were going to get through it regardless of what would happen, correct?
Yeah.
And that determination probably also led you to not have as many. Would you say you struggled a bit less than everybody else, even though the playing field was level? What was maybe like the drop off rate? Because surely some people don't finish; they just throw in the towel, they just like quit it after the first week. They're like, "This is not for me."
I think for me, so when I joined, I've joined the military twice. The first time I joined the army in 2015, and then I took a break because I moved to America, and then I rejoined in 2019.
Mm.
Um, and so in 2015, our military was all volunteer military, and the drop rate back then was, I wouldn't say was quite high because everyone joined because they wanted to, but it was higher than when I joined in 2019, because in 2019 now our military is a conscript military. So whether you want to be there or not, you have to be there. But because I signed up voluntarily, even for 2019, when I joined the Marines, the people that are there, they already the standard is already quite, or the requirements rather, are quite high to even get in. So the majority of people that do get into the Marines, they are quite fit already. Not everyone, but everyone has the prerequisites to complete the 11 months of military training. Um, but I think what really got me through and motivated me, and um, I think maybe put me a little bit higher in terms of my willingness to do it, was because I did it voluntarily. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do this, because I think it was just me and maybe like two other guys that were there voluntarily. Everyone else was conscripted. And I think just the fact that you are there because you want to do something and not because you have to do something, I think that would get you so far in life. Like your own motivation, if you can find your own motivation to why you're doing something instead of having someone to tell you to do something, that is going to be your way of getting to the goal, 100%.
That's a wonderful way to put it. Uh, Tell me about America. I didn't. Maybe I forgot about this part, but so 2015 to 2019, you were in the United States.
So from 2015 to 2017, I was working a few civilian jobs. I was working as a teacher at a school.
Hmm.
I was working a retail job at an electronics store. And then 2017, me and my family, we moved to America until 2019. And while we were in America, I studied at college. I studied web development, so creating websites and stuff like that. I didn't get very far because the school system in America is very different from how it is over here. Unfortunately, I didn't get very far with what I actually wanted to do. So my first year and a half was just general education, meaning I had to do biology, I had to do math, I had to do science, I had to do art, like all that kind of like apologize my language with all that stupid shit that I really did not want to do, because I was there to study web development. That's what I wanted to do,
Mm.
and I didn't start doing that until I was in my second year, and by that time I said I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm here. I have no motivation to do this. The only reason I was in college was because I didn't know what else to do. Um, I was in the track team. It was really fun. Like the college track team that I was in, I made quite good few friends. But I could never find my own reason to be in America apart from moving there with my family. And that's why ultimately I moved back to Sweden to go back to the military in 2019.
Which state were you in?
California. I was in just outside of Los Angeles.
Yeah, I keep hearing things about California. I think it might have been Joe Rogan that said it, where it's like by the time the news of California being golden came to Europe, California was a shit place essentially. Now I keep seeing San Francisco, Los Angeles, homeless people everywhere. Just just a disaster. And did you notice some of that back then, or?
Absolutely. I noticed both the highs and the lows. But I think the biggest thing that hit me was that like uh, you will have the world's highest and the world's lowest in America, but the majority of people are in the middle. The absolute majority of people are middle class people, and somehow I don't know how, but somehow they make through their day over there as well, working maybe 2 to 3 jobs each week. And like when you speak to a lot of people that live in California, they will like you. I'll ask them, why do you live in California? Because everything is so expensive, housing and everything is expensive. Like, oh, why do you live in California? Like, oh, the weather is so beautiful and the beach is right here. And then you follow up with the question of, but how often do you actually get to enjoy that? They're like, not that often. I'm like, exactly. So what's the point? Like people don't tend to think about some reasons as to why they do things. They just know that there is a reason, but how often can you actually utilize like why you're there? And I think that's one of the reasons as to eventually my mother and father also moved back to Sweden because they realized it's just not worth it. As nice as it can be when you are free from work, which is very rare, it's just not worth it at the end.
Yeah, the combination I mean, killing yourself for work is essentially what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why would you have a house if you're not going to live in it, right?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
keep hearing these stories, especially from American like influencers and these rich guys that obviously trying to give advice to younger people, and they're saying um, a house is just to sleep in, and then you'll see
Yeah.
a TikTok of it and it's controversial, but to some extent he has a point because I mean if you're
Hmm.
going to work all day long and there was this quote I heard the other day. It was in a book. It said, if you don't feel like coming in on Saturday, don't bother coming back on Sunday. Which is implying that you're going to be working weekends, you're going to be working long hours, you're going to be sacrificing all those pretty things that, as you said, the beach, the mountains, the view, you're never going to get to
Hmm.
really experience. So,
Yep.
but it's I think it's good for you to have gone through this experience. I mean, your family as a whole, you probably now see America a bit differently. You probably see these
Absolutely. Yeah.
opportunities, and I would be willing to say you probably love Sweden much more
Hmm.
now, as you see you have so much nature there. You've got all the fjords and whatnot. It is a spectacular country.
Yeah. I think something that really that really has helped like the family and me as well to like appreciate things like we were talking about before is also like prior to living in America, I've also lived in the Middle East for 2 years in two quite like rough places, both Syria and in Pakistan,
Mm.
and seeing how bad things can really be. Like when you live in somewhat of a nice country in Europe, and I'm sure you've seen the same situations in Slovenia, but you think of like, oh, that's a pretty bad situation. Like, oh, we ran out of coffee or we ran out of whatever. We ran out of, oh,
Mm.
this fucking sucks. And you can't buy because the store is closed because it's closed at this time and blah, blah, blah. And it's in your current situation, absolutely it sucks. That's not what I'm saying. But in comparison to how bad things can really be, it's not that bad. And I think something that has really helped me throughout life is knowing how bad things really can be, and then compare it to how bad I'm having it right now, without trying to minimize my situation that I'm currently in. Like I'm still acknowledging, okay, this situation is pretty shitty. Um, but I also know that it can be way worse. So how can I make it like what can I do to make it better? That like my childhood place that I've lived in, combined with the situations that the military has put me in so far, those two combined have really helped me put life in perspective, which I can really appreciate.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the worst thing we ever had it here was during Corona when literally we ran out of toilet paper because that was
Yeah.
lockdown. And when you think about it, it's, quote unquote, pun intended, a shitty situation. But
Mhm.
this problem that you're having is actually a luxury in some countries. They
Yeah,
would kill to have your problem.
exactly.
And yeah, I'm sure that it put things into perspective. But I have to ask, how was it for a person as white as you and I to be in those countries, surrounded by, I call them sun
Um,
absorbers because I mean that these I do envy these people because I go sit in the sunlight for 16 seconds and I either get a sunburn but I never get a tan. Any tan
yeah,
I do get runs away. Like
yeah.
so,
To live when I was living in Syria, I was at the age of 6 to 7 years old. So I don't really remember too much from that time. But I do remember Pakistan very well. And Pakistan was it was a very unique experience, to put it lightly. There was a lot of threats coming towards us. There was a lot of times where mom had packed our bags because we might like get an evacuation order like in just a few moments notice. Um, there we heard shootings, explosions nearby, almost once every month or so. We weren't allowed to go anywhere without our driver, and the driver was hired by the UN. So wherever we would go somewhere, we would call our driver. He was the kindest man I've ever met. He was a native Pakistani, so he knew all the places like where you shouldn't go, where you should get your groceries, and how to get to school and all that kind of stuff. Super nice, super kind man. But we wouldn't go anywhere without him. Even like if we would just go to the local market, which was maybe like a 10-minute walk away, we would never go without him. Because whenever you were out, you would be stared down by people. And you never knew if it was just because they haven't really seen foreigners before, if they were just curious, or if they were like an actual threat to you. And I think that was the hardest part, especially for my mother, because my dad, he was away so much with work. So whenever we were out somewhere, it was usually my mother and then my three sisters and our driver. And I think that was the hardest part about it all is like you never really knew which kind of situation you were in with the local population. And even outside the school, I attended an American school or an international school, but like American led. There were I think the barricades that were outside were 5 meters walls, like concrete walls with watchtowers with armed security, barbed wire, and there was security on the campus going around. And you had to go through like a school checkpoint, like with your ID. You had to show them to the security officer, and then you had to pass through a metal detector. Like
damn.
um, it like I said, a unique experience to say the least.
And you're doing this on a daily
Um,
basis.
every single day,
Wow.
every single day. Yeah.
I first experienced this. It was late last year. I was searching for a new job, and I found this advert which they were looking for a private chef in the American embassy, and I thought, wow, this is actually a pretty interesting gig. And I signed up, just for fun, essentially. I didn't think they were actually going to take me because I think I'd make for a pretty rubbish private chef. But turns out the family's actually, the I think the father and the son were like really avid cyclists, and I thought, wow, I might be able to, sneak in here. I've got good English. And when I got there for the interview, I went through this exact same procedure. It's like all these security guards, like, put your wallets out and your keys and your this, and you got any weapons on you? I'm like, what do you think you came in with, a knife bag? And
Yeah.
yeah, I never got the job. Never heard back from them actually. But thinking back, it was a interesting experience, but one that I can't imagine if I got the job and they would have to do that. Whenever there was a delegation, whenever like constantly going through these checks, it would be pretty stressful.
Yeah.
And that's,
Absolutely.
and this is, in my case, it would have been a first world problem for you. and your mother and your three sisters. This is a situation where it's like on a daily basis you're surrounded by foreigners, which, like you say, you don't know if it's a threat or if it's
Mhm.
friendly, and um, that must have been an extremely stressful time for your family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because when I was there, I was in fifth grade, so what's that like 12, 13 or something?
Yeah,
And at that time, like I said, I don't remember much from Syria, but in Pakistan, I remember that bright as day. Like I remember what street I lived in. Like I remember what area I lived in. Like I remember what house number. Like everything is super clear to me. And I remember all my best friends and everything like that. So it's still very close to me, even if that was many, many years ago. Um, Even though it's not traumatizing by any means, but it's bright as day. Like I
yeah.
can clearly remember things from that time.
Are you still in touch with any of them, or
Uh, I wouldn't say I'm in touch with them, but we do follow each other on like Instagram and Facebook. So we you know we kind of know what we're up to, which I really appreciate. And you know whenever I do decide, because I have some friends that live in Canada now, some
Mhm.
people live in so obviously still in Pakistan. Some people live in Germany, France, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that by the time like if I ever go to Canada, and I go to the city that person lives in, of course I'm gonna be like, hey, do you want to meet up for a coffee or for food? Um, but I think it's just the fact that you know you kind of know what you're doing, not necessarily day by day basis, but like
Mhm.
if someone does something big, they get a new job or they move somewhere, you know, it's like, oh, nice, you see what they're up to. And I can appreciate those small things for sure.
Yeah, I think those small things can really make a day when I think the the idea of knowing somebody, especially knowing them from a young, ripe age, and seeing them potentially go through struggles, and you see them go through breakups, and you see them go through depression or anxiety or whatever, and then seeing them climb out of it and become better people. I think it just makes you happy to be there to have been able to monitor their journey, and if you were able to help them in any way, that's even more so.
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, a lot of people you met through your travels, which, as I've seen, you've done a lot. How's your experience of meeting people through both on that? Because I think the reason why you and I are sitting here and the reason why other guests are going to be coming on the show and have come on the show is because we've all got something in common. There was this, denominator that brought us all together and gave us an outlet to essentially meet tremendous variety of very interesting people from around the world.
Yeah. So, like I said, I don't create worth any content by any means anymore. But even I think the last time like I properly consider myself a worth under streamer was in 2019, and that's 4 years ago. But I still have people that I am in daily contact to this day that you know I talk to. We play other games together. That has nothing to do with War Thunder. And I think it's so nice that even though you might not ever have met a person or talk to them, you still have, like you said, like a common denominator that just brings people together as a community. You can create so many friendships and ways to communicate and do things even outside of that common denominator that you had originally. And I have a lot of people in my old community that I still talk to this day, and I play games with, and I think that's I think it's quite frankly beautiful. I think it's so cool that we can do that in this day of age. That you can find people online that you have never met, you might never have spoken to, you've never seen their face, they only know who you are, but you can still find time and place to enjoy something together, and I think that's really cool.
Were you able to meet any of them in person? The people you met through
Yes,
Orphan Dead?
yeah, I have actually. I actually met Donny at TwitchCon
Oh,
2017.
wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, and then I've also met another person who was visiting Sweden last year. Met that person, had a few beers with him, played some games. But apart from that, I haven't met a lot of them, but I've met a few. And it's really, it's strange and it's not strange because it's strange meeting the person behind the screen, but it's not strange because you've always somehow always knew who that person is.
Yes.
Like it's a very strange feeling, but it feels very natural at the same time.
I think it feels strange for the first maybe 30 seconds, and then it just
Yeah.
feels like you've known this person for forever. Because
Exactly.
for me, that was Remy. I'm the first Avenger. He'll
Hmm.
be the next thing I upload. Obviously, this is going to be uploaded a couple of weeks later, but it was, I think, 2 years ago. He messaged me and he was like, "Dude, I'm going to come to Croatia," and he drove with his car all the way from Germany, and we were both kind of nervous, and I'm like, "Yeah, you can park here," and he gets out of the car, and we're sort of looking at each other, and it's just like, bro, like, it's
Yeah.
just you just know the person inside and out.
Yeah.
Yeah, Donny, man. Can we say a few words about Donny, because I'm extremely
Let's go.
blown away by his story. And obviously I spoke about this, how we met, where I guess I don't know, he was shit talking me on stream, or somebody in chat, somebody jumped into my Discord and he was like, "Yo, Orange, there's guys, talking bad about you." And back then I was in the drama mode, I was in the sort
Hmm.
of, I was looking for conflict, because I knew it was gonna get value out of it. And I don't know what, but that day I was feeling kind of kind. I was feeling soft-ish, and I thought, let me challenge him. And I invited him for a game, and then we ended up, going from supposedly potentially arch enemies to being, best buddies.
Hmm.
And then he had that journey with Pokemon cards, where I just thought, like, what the, like, where did you come up with this stuff? Like,
Yeah.
and then I hear the numbers, I hear how much he's making, in one weekend just trading them, and I just thought, this guy's made for it. Um, so what year did you say you met him in TwitchCon?
2017.
2017. He was,
Yeah.
well, he was still hardcore in Warthunder back then.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's always been such a passionate kid about all the things he's done,
Yeah.
which I so much respect. I mean, obviously you could say he suffers from Asperger's, but I think that's actually his little hidden superpower.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like people that have either Asperger, which for those of you who don't know is it's a mild version of autism essentially. Um, there's certain things these people have hidden within them, which if they can locate that source of just it's genius essentially. Some of them are incredible at some tasks they do, and there's some wonderful documentaries out there. Um, but of course, they do have certain. They can be. I think the biggest problem is they're overwhelmed sometimes by sounds, noises. They get distracted easily. Um, but with Donny, I'm so happy that he was able to move out of the gaming world into something that is business-like, and he can actually make not just a living, but he can really build himself an empire,
Yeah.
using his true self, essentially, right? Which I think is very important. Like I see you have, the correct values and the mentality to be in the army, and but I know it that you're going to go far, and this is your career, and that you're going to enjoy it and be made for it, and do good for the world, do good for Sweden. And I always am so happy to talk to people that have found, their correct path, where you just know you're just going the right direction. Did you, at any point in the last, say, 10, 12 years, have one of those moments? I've described them as, if you're driving a car and this car is your life, and you're on this road and you get to a roundabout. Now, usually a roundabout has about 4 exits, but this time the roundabout has an infinity of exits. And so you have the option of just spinning around and wasting time, not choosing one, choosing the correct path. Was there ever a moment where you thought, "Damn, I think I've made the wrong call. Maybe I should turn around"? Like, ever feel lost or like sort of deprived of meaning? And how did you tackle that?
Absolutely. Moving to America was one of those things. That was one of the most, I would say, like defining moments in my life. Without like trying to exaggerate or anything like or make something too big. But it's because when I moved to America, I basically quit my job. It didn't work out with my current girlfriend, which that was one of the worst things that I went through at the time. And when I was in America, I had a very hard time in terms of like social life. And I went down a very, very rough mental path in terms of like how like my mental health was. I was in a very, very bad state. I don't want to I don't want to self-diagnose anything, but if if I could, I would say that I had depression if I had to self-diagnose. But obviously I don't want to, but I've said it now. But I was in a very, very bad mental state. And I wouldn't leave my room. Like I wouldn't talk to, like I was living with my family, but I wouldn't say a word to my family. There could be days where I didn't smile. Like I was down bad. Um, and I think it got to the point where I realized what I needed to do to fix that, which was basically to get more friends, like just get more friends and all. But like that was really what it was, because I didn't have a social life. I didn't have people to talk to on a daily basis. I didn't have people that were like-minded, that were the same age as me, and people, friends, like basically just friends. I didn't have any friends over there. Um, and moving back to Sweden, I didn't really know it at the time that that was what I had to do. I just knew that I had to get out of the current situation that I was in, and moving back to a place that I knew I had friends, I had comfort, I knew how things worked, I knew how the system worked, I knew how everything was just working. Like the daily hours of the grocery store, like everything, those simple things in
Mm.
life, and where I had people making that choice of going back to that was what saved me basically. Like it was like I said, a life-defining moment for me, and I'm so happy I took that step. But what led me there was ultimately, the hard decision of moving in the first place.
Was the move instigated? I'm going to assume here it was probably your father's job, or was it related to that? Was it a joint decision, or were you sort of interested in doing it, or was it something that was sort of imposed and you was like, well, this is happening, you best deal with it, and we'll figure it out.
No, so it was very much a decision, like a family decision to move. Because what happened was it wasn't a job related thing at all. Which like a lot of people assume that it was, which it's obvious because we moved around in the world because of my dad's job. But this was actually because we won on the green card lottery that the U.S. government holds.
Ah.
So we got like the family, we got green cards, which is like permanent residence, but you're not a citizen basically, so you can't vote, and there's some things that you're not allowed to do, but you're allowed to stay in the country, work and study and stuff. Um, and it was like, as we wanted as a family, and we talked through it with, like, in the family, like, okay, what do we want to do? And we were pretty much all in agreement that, okay, we want to try it, because if we don't try it, we are going to regret that
Hmm.
for the rest of our lives, because it's easier to do something and regret it than to regret something that you never did.
Yes.
So it was as hard of a choice that it was a very easy choice.
Absolutely. I think that's a very, very smart way to look at it. And did you? I'm assuming you have a home here. Was it? What was the process there? Did you just leave it there or sell it? Was how
We
much?
basically we left our jobs and sold it.
Ah.
It was yeah, it was obviously it didn't happen in a day. Like
Mm.
this entire process was like a year long. But at the end of the day, we quit our jobs and we sold our house, and we uh we got a new one when we got to America.
Must have been a stressful time. But like you said, I mean, this was probably, as you look back down, the correct decision to make. Made
Hmm.
you a better person. Allowed. I mean, this was going to sound weird, but it allowed you to go into that state. I call it. I don't think you were depressed. Right. To return back to that topic, I think most of the time what we're dealing with is you feeling depressed, right? You're exerting the certain of the attributes that you would say somebody is depressed, but because I always say it this way, it's an extreme analogy, but imagine your whole family goes in a bus and they're driving somewhere, and the bus gets into an accident, and everybody dies. That's a really traumatic experience. That is something that I think there's not a person in the world that wouldn't be depressed from that. But nowadays, we feel these moments of depression in which I sometimes say to people I talk to, I say, I'm depressed every day. I have a moment every day where I just feel like this is not worth it. This thing isn't working out for me. I feel tired. I feel, excuses essentially. And what I know is a complete mind killer is when you admit to yourself that you can't do it, which goes back to your experience with the army. You volunteered. Some people were thrown into it, and life likes to throw stuff at you, right? Like life is like this really mean person that just here's have some shit here, have a common cold, here now your leg's gonna start hurting, and and you're constantly like, wow, what the fuck? You're going to be dodging these objects and all these, diseases and illnesses and pains. And I think that what we sometimes do and what most people do, and, I'm guilty of it, I'm sure you're guilty of it at some point, is where we give in. Like you said, you locked yourself in your room, you purposefully isolated yourself, you went into the comfort zone, essentially, into the confines of your chamber, we could say, right? And you couldn't get through it until you basically said, well, fuck this, let me meet some new people, let me get out there, let me socialize, and that's where you said your life started to get up, right?
Yeah, and I completely agree, and I think that's why I'm very like aware of not like giving myself like the self-diagnose of depression, because just like you said, I think the feeling I had was like moments of depression, but what depression actually means, I can't say, because
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's different for each person, and that's why I said like I was just in a very very rough mental state. Like I just didn't know what to do, and that could be like anxiety, it could be depression. I don't know, but I at the time I was just like I had moments of depression, and at times where I'm just like I don't know what to do, kind of feeling like hopelessness. Um,
Yeah.
but then you just have to figure out what you need to do to get out of that situation. And I think for a lot of people, they may never find that, and that's maybe that's when it comes in, like the depression kind of thing. Like you don't know what to do, and like everything you do is just not good. What do I know? But I'm trying to be very what's it called, constrictive when it comes to like using the word depression, because I don't want to say that I had, because I don't know if I
I
did, but
understand, yeah. You're very polite. You're very conservative with the word. I'm a little bit more edgy in my ways. I refer to it, back in the day we used to say "get good" in warfare
oh yeah.
aspects, because people would complain about there's bias, there's this thing's overpowered, this tank is too strong, Gaijin this, Gaijin that. But ultimately, I think it's not it's not what happens to you, it's how you deal with it. It's how
Yep.
what your reaction is, and like I always think, and it goes back to that old adage of if you're going through hell, keep going, because you're
Mhm.
gonna have these moments. And for me, if I had a bad day yesterday, what I said to myself is, look, you had a bad day, you weren't productive, you didn't do shit. You know what? I'll read 20 pages of a book, I'll go to sleep, and I've done progress. That's even if I just read 20 words from one page, I've made some progress. And because I try to look at it from a very like a finance standpoint, compounding interest. If you were to put €1 or dollar or pound or whatever into your bank every single day, eventually that pile is gonna start getting bigger, and eventually you'll be like, okay, you know what? Let me put 2 every day. Let me put 3. Let me put 10. Let me put 100. And I think the same it is with your mind also. Nowadays we live in this time where everything is immediate. Hey, mum, give me your credit card so I can buy the new shiniest tank in War Thunder, so I can be the best player. And then you do that and you realize, I'm not actually any better than I was. Oh no, I'm feeling low on energy. Let me go watch TikTok for a bit. I want to have a beach body, but I want to have it in a week. Not going to happen,
It's a
sunshine.
generation of instant gratification.
Yeah, and it's the same with mental health, because we feel like, oh, I'm having a bad time right now. I want to feel on cloud 9 tomorrow, and in a couple of minutes. It could be a long time. I'm
Yep.
sure for you, this went on for weeks, months, could have gone on for years if you stayed in America potentially, and it would have probably led to your detriment if you didn't find some solution, right? But the way that you were able to return back to your home country, found your purpose in the military, that's something that you just have to go through. You have to go through that painful process, keep going through hell, and you've done so. And I'm extremely happy for that. And I think also that that, like you said, that process made you. And if we were to go back and take that away from your life, you'd be a different person sitting here. I don't think you'd be
Absolutely.
as strong and as mentally capable, and potentially as happy. Correct?
No, I completely agree, and I think it's the it's the hard times that change a person.
Mm.
Like if it was just life on easy mode, what's the fun in that? It's like playing a video game on very hard. When you beat that final boss, you're gonna
Yeah.
feel much better than if you beat it on easy. So
Yeah. And it is actually, speaking of bosses, is a brilliant way to put it. Because if you remember any video game you ever played, right, when the boss comes around, the boss is always stronger than you. It's bigger than you. It's got more HP than you. It's just, you know, the boss is life, essentially. The bosses keep coming. And the only difference is that in video games, we were excited for the boss to come. In life, often than not, you know, we have this... I was writing this excerpt, this essay one day, where I went through this really interesting breakup. I'll tell you this story because you mentioned you went through a breakup. Yours was forced through move. Mine, I think, happened because I was lost in life. I was sort of unsure if I want to continue with college or if I want to go into the culinary world or just YouTube. And she must have smelled that insecurity on me and was just like, I'm out of here. And there was this one time where I had a moment, I was tripping, I was really drugged up, and I had the worst, like, sort of anxiety attack of my life, where I couldn't look my mother into the face. Cartoon Network, you got a couple of characters where the camera only pans up to their neck. I was in that state. And I don't know what happened, but I believe that my girlfriend at the time, we were still together, sent me a text. This was a couple of months before she broke up with me. And this text was a very simple text. It was one of those moments where you just have to go and reply, and then you can go back to sleeping, drinking, partying, whatever you're doing, you know, tripping, doesn't matter. But for some reason, as soon as I opened up, I think it was Facebook, I couldn't remember her name, couldn't remember my name, didn't know what I was doing. It was a real bad case of an anxiety attack, which I think has its core in, you know, your mental state being sort of broken, not having your foundation set in life. And the way that I explained it to myself, it felt like a boss fight. It felt like this woman that I was dating at the time was a boss. And I walked into this boss completely unprepared. My inventory empty, my weapons degraded, you know, nothing, no potions, no food. And you're just standing there and this giant behemoth, this cloud, this monstrosity is staring you down and you have no way to defend against it. And I think that's what, for most people, the depression or the feeling of depression feels like. It's the hopelessness. It's the feeling of shit. Why didn't I, you know, do the checkpoint couple of caves back or whatever it was? Why didn't I stop at the trader? Why didn't I stock up on the food? Why didn't I, you know, go to sleep and do this thing tomorrow? Like, now I'm stuck here. It's 2 a.m. and I've got to do this boss. And if I don't do it, the game's over and I got to start from the beginning. And, you know, it's essentially, I think it's the 6 Ps. It says piss, poor preparation, something like that. Poor preparation, like, I'll think of it later down the line, but essentially, if you don't prepare, you know, you're gonna have consequences to deal with, and it's good for both of us that we went through this state relatively early in our lives. I think for some people, it happens later. They go through these challenging breakups way later in life. They go through challenging situations in life later, and I think a lot of the times they're not adept to it. You know, as a kid, you probably put your hand onto a coal or a burning stove and you burnt yourself and you're like, okay, fire, hot, let me not do it. Some people don't do that until their teenage years. And then I think sometimes it's better to get burned very early, you know, because a kid's brain, we learn quickly, we heal quickly, you know, and we love doing dumb shit. I mean, kids will eat dirt and crash from their bikes, you know, and fall in love and do dumb things like that. So I completely forgot what I was about to ask you, but
let me ask you a question then.
Okay, fair enough.
What made you go into the culinary, I guess, area of the world?
Essentially,
what sparked your interest?
Yeah, at the time I was studying geography and pedagogy. Now I liked geography; it was an interesting subject to me, but pedagogy was just disastrous. It was me, 4 gay dudes, and a classroom full of women, and the majority of them I would never want to teach kids, and yet that's exactly what they're going to do, and it was sort of frightening me. But this is the girl that was my boss fight. I was dating her, and she was working in this vegan bistro kind of thing. And I had an exam in geography that I had to pass in order to get to the next year, and there was a prerequisite for this exam, right? This short exam thingy. Half the class didn't do the thing. We just all failed, you know. And you failed the first time, failed the second time, failed the third time. And I was like, "Fuck this shit! I'm done with this college. I'm not going back to it." And at the time, what my girlfriend did is she said, I'm gonna get status of being a student. So she's gonna enroll, pay for college somewhere, but she's not actually going to be going there. You know, it was one of those paid kind of scammy, whatever. You're basically, you're not stealing from the country, but you're in this grey area in the system.
Yeah.
And she was going to do that. In the meantime, she was going to work as a student in this catering place and this food court or whatever, the vegan bistro. And I thought, this is a pretty good idea. Let me do something similar. Let me also try 1 year just being in the culinary world to see if this actually would interest me. But unfortunately, none of the actual colleges were open, and I wasn't going to do the thing she did because I'm not a scammy. So I actually enrolled into it's a higher vocational college for tourism and hospitality.
Okay.
And it was in a town, I think 60 kilometers away from the capital. So I was really confused. I was like, am I going to drive there? Am I going to get an apartment? Turns out, driving there with my car is faster than taking the bus from where I live to the capital center, which was like, to me, it was mind blowing. You know, I would be leaving the capital in the morning, and all the people were going into the capital. So I was looking at, you know, just congestion for miles and miles on the other side, and I've got empty roads. And on the way back, the exact same story. So, and then COVID came, and we actually had remote class, which wasn't that good, but because I was paying for my tuition or whatever you call it, I didn't actually have to attend most of it. So my life was just riding bikes and having a good time. But what happened was that I really enjoyed what we were doing there. I enjoyed the kind of story they were trying to tell. And then I started working in this one company, and as I met more people, you know, I met people from the Balkans, Bosnians, Serbians, Albanians, Macedonians. My mind was conditioned from an early age. These people are lazy. These people are weird. These people are not to be trusted. These people are the Pakistanis on the road looking at you weirdly, and you think, oh, they're just going to steal my shit. But it turns out they were the nicest people, and I loved working with them. And there was an energy around them that made me just want to be there. There was a camaraderie. The way you have it in the military, it was there. Because you're sweating after 12 hours, there's shitloads of orders, tickets are coming in. It's a stressful world. And essentially, you are soldiers on the front line. There's, you know, people need to eat. The food has to go out, has to be consistent, has to be a certain quality level. And I fell in love partially with what we were doing, but unfortunately, to my detriment, of course, the 12-hour shifts, you're working weekends, you're working holidays, and what boiled down was that I asked myself, when I was at my lowest point, I remember this, I took out a notebook and I wrote down a very simple question, that is, what are you good at? And I realized that it's not that I'm not good at cooking, I'm good at leading, I'm good at managing, but I'm good at English, I'm good at talking to people, I feel like I'm good at conversing, and I also enjoy doing it. Can I do that in a kitchen environment? I don't think you can. And that's where my sort of search for life happened again, where I said, where do you want to be? You know, and I think that question has to be asked early on. Obviously, you won't be able to answer it before you're 25, because you're not really thinking about those things. But when the questions of family, long-term career, security, what country you want to live in, where do you want to have a home, what kind of home do you want to have, with whom you want to build this, that's when you start to really think of the important bits. And when I started thinking more about family, because I was actually forced in a similar way that, you know, you had to leave your girlfriend in 2015, right, in Sweden, because you were departing. I had to leave a girl that I was dating last year because I was like, this is not working out. We're long distance. We're not spending time that would be quality time. I'm stressed out. I don't get to develop my projects. This thing with Doom Time would have never happened if I stayed in the culinary world, unfortunately. Now, do I miss it? I do. And I think in the long term, with the career that I want to go into, which is very movable, you know, remote work, running lots of different things, I'd love to go for 1 day in a month and work in a kitchen. I'd love to just join the camaraderie, you know, go into a march, you know, one time, because it is a fun environment. It's a challenging environment, but I don't see myself reaching my potential in that industry without sacrificing too much. But what it has done to me is it's given me so much respect for the people that do, you know. And so I also have respect for people who work in the army, because it's the same type of thing. I have respect for people working in retail, like you one day did. I no longer look down on people just because it's like, oh, there's a cashier in a store, and you think, oh, she's just a useless person, she's a robot, you can be replaced by AI or whatever. It's like, no, every job is a respectable job, and to get to that acknowledgement, I think you have to go and do those jobs, and there's nothing low about it. There's nothing disrespectful about it.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a very important part there because I don't think you get that insight until you actually stand there yourself. Just like you said, you don't really understand the hardship and like how rough it can be until you're actually in that spot yourself. And then all of a sudden, like everything just opens up. You're like, holy shit, I have never like experienced this much
Yeah.
respect for a line of work before. It was similar to when I was working. I was working at McDonald's at the most busy place here in Gothenburg years back, and I was working at the cashier, and I was working weekends from like 12 to 6 like at night, and the stuff that you had to like go through as a cashier is like it's unbelievable. Like people will be like you will have fist fights right in front of you. People would throw cheeseburgers across the room. You were just like, what the hell is happening here? But you don't really realize how like because when you're standing in line and something like that happens, you can like, oh shit, okay, that happened. But when you're standing as a cashier, like in the front, like having to meet that enemy, if you will,
Mm.
you don't realize how hard that is until you actually stand there yourself. And I think a lot of people need to have that kind of um, like I call like a aha kind of experience. Like, oh shit, this is real. Like this is harder than what I thought. And more stressful than I thought. Takes more energy than you thought. And I think a lot more people need to go through something that you and I have done
Yeah.
without like being too like boasty about it. But I think it teaches a lot of people a valuable lesson.
No, I think a lot of people are disconnected from it. I've noticed a
Yeah.
lot, especially very academic people, because
Mhm.
they'll go through high school or as we say gymnasium, where you get some generic knowledge. Then they go into college, and especially I think women nowadays they're reaching a high level of master degrees, which is I think for every 100 women there's only 73 men that get a master's degree, and by the time they finish them, they're usually the ages of like 27 to 29. Some do it even later, and they basically exit the world prepared to immediately get into a job which is supposed to be some relaxing office job. I'm not doing that much work. I'm doing a little bit of research and some, I don't know, biology or whatever, and they're prepared to start a family. They're prepared to just jump into there and just live a happy life with a man who's already got everything set up. But chances are there could be a dude at the same age who's doing one of those quote unquote shitty jobs because he is still building the ground on which he has to stand, because these jobs are the most important ones. I follow an English teaching Facebook page, which is for people. They ask simple questions. They ask questions like, what verb gets inserted here, and they'll have like 3 different options. And it was just today I opened up Facebook by accident, and somebody asked, which of these 3 professions is the most important one? And it was doctor, something else, and farmer. And you think about it, and it's like, a doctor is pretty important, but the doctor dead if you don't have the farmer, And for most people, being a farmer is not some respectable job. But like, dude, if you don't have the farmer, you don't have the doctor. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
it's, for me, this ties back, when I asked that question about how to sell me military, as in like, I'm a little bit not that buying into it beyond the discipline point of view. That's what I saw with the culinary world, as working as a waiter or working as a cook as I did. I think people should be forced to do that the way it used to be to go into the army, compulsory. They should go into these jobs, do them for a month, just so they get the view. And I think it would make everything better. I think it would make the experience of those who still work there much more enjoyable, because you'd actually understand. When I go into a restaurant now and somebody screws up an order, or they're late with the food, something goes bad, I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. I get it. You need help? Dude, I'll get back there. I'll help you do it. Like,
Yeah.
and they feel the energy, and it relaxes them, And then you thank them and you leave them a tip, no problem. But people lack that wide lens view. They lack they lack the vision that those people on the other side, they're not your slaves, they're not some dumb person. They're people just like you and I, and they're just trying to make a living. And it could be that that's something they actually enjoy doing, and they would enjoy doing it more, and they would do it better if you didn't give them shit for it every single day.
Yep. It's all about perspective, really.
Yeah. Have you ever done any job besides retail? So you said you did retail, you did McDonald's. You mentioned now you worked as a teacher. You've
Yep.
really done a wide spectrum of things. Among others, you've also done YouTube. How do you
Yep.
view that? I was going to say this because obviously during the time that I would suggest for people to do these jobs, it was when I was doing YouTube. YouTube was like my escape from the shitty job. Like, instead of me having to work at McDonald's, let me go and do YouTube. But that itself is also a hard job. I mean, people look at YouTubers and they think, influencers, like, there's no work here. Like, they just play video games all day long, but they don't see the hours that you put into it. Obviously, you didn't, to my knowledge, build a blasting career out of it, but you were doing it as a part-time thing. It was a hobby. You had fun. You probably made a couple of dollars here and then. How do you view YouTube as a source of income or a source of making cash?
I think it's a fully valid way of doing it. I think once again, it's all about the perspective. Like you said, I've never been on the huge receiving end of gaining money on YouTube. Twitch was more my thing, and it worked pretty well there. But the whole content creation phenomenon, I guess, of like earning money that way, I think is a very valid, just like really any other of way of being paid. I think the reason a lot of people just don't see it as a real thing is, one, because they don't have its perspective like of it, because they don't know what happens behind the scenes, and two, that it's new. In general, people are afraid of new things, and I think that plays a big role into think like what's the word, illegitimizing, like making it not as worth as it might actually be. Especially coming from people like 30 and above. I'm
Yeah.
not saying like everyone our age is like super welcoming, but I think in general 30 and above are more skeptical towards media content creation than what younger people are, because it's more of a normal thing nowadays. So I absolutely, if someone can make a living by doing videos that they enjoy doing, hats off. Like, if you found your way of going on in life, that's perfect. I'm happy for you,
Yeah.
regardless of what that may be.
I absolutely agree. Because one of the biggest things that I ended up getting from YouTube wasn't the video editing or the cash or the influence or anything. It was actually, particularly for me, the English. It was this ability to talk, whereas before I was just a shy person. I wouldn't dare to just I mean, essentially what I'm doing right now, what we're doing is we're talking. We're strangers, right? I mean, because by all means and regularities, we've never met each other. We know very little of each other. So this should be a very awkward encounter. This should be, by all requisites, a really weird thing to do. And yet we both feel comfy. We feel like we're sitting in the same room. We're talking about the same topics, having a good time. And I think people, the 30 and above, the boomers, they view YouTube in this weird way, which I will never fully understand. Perhaps is the way that I view TikTok. Maybe it's just an age thing. But I once said this as a kid, YouTube and what was happening. It was like a bunch of us kids were on this playground, and there's a fence, a wooden fence, like from a Tom and Jerry cartoon. And you can see there's something happening on the other side. The neighbors are having a party. There's a YouTube party going there. And all the kids, they'll run to the fence and they'll stare at the little holes, and they'll see some of it. But those of us who did YouTube, we sort of took a couple of steps back and we got ourselves a crate or a box or something to stand on, and we brought it to the fence and we climbed on top and we had a look over the fence, and we were like, holy shit, there's a whole world out there. There's all this money. There's all these things, like the possibilities. And for me, I still have that hunger in me. That's something I was never able to fully remove, because I was able to take, my channel high enough to the point where it was making sufficient money where you could live from it. And I think to combine that, as you mentioned, to create something that you enjoy making, which I think for most of us, especially for men, I think for a man to be content is give him a challenge, give him a problem to solve. That's how I feel about it. It's like, that's what the cure for male depression should be. You know, give a man a problem and let him solve it, right? Leave the emotion bit to women. Leave that thing there. I don't need it. It's good to feel loved, but I think what I feel more is I want to feel powerful with myself. That's why, you know when I was happiest? It was 2 a.m, and I just managed to put together something in Adobe After Effects, which I've never used. And I had to go and learn it from scratch. Google it, YouTube it, find the files, do it in Photoshop, import it, edit it. And when it came out and you're looking at it, you're like, wow, I made this. And I went to bed and I slept like a baby. And if I didn't go through those hardships with YouTube, I don't think, there's no bloody way I would have been open to all the other things that the world offers. And so now, and I'll say this for the world, for anybody who's listening or watching on YouTube, is there's a reason there's that Jim Carrey movie, Say Yes to Everything. Like, just try it. Say yes to those opportunities. Say yes to those dates you think are going to be bad. Say yes to that job interview that you don't really care about. Because you never know who you're going to meet, what kind of chance you're going to get, what skills you're going to develop. And worst case, you'll go to America for a year or two. You'll come back and you'll think, yeah, it was bad, but I don't regret trying it. And I think that's what
Amen, brother.
I think that's what it boils down to, is, you know, taking those shots. Because I know years back I was thinking, oh, maybe I should start a YouTube channel. And I can't imagine how regretful I would be if I was sitting here today and I didn't get to try that. You know, it's not to say I wouldn't.
It's the thought of what if.
I think those are the most painful thoughts, are the what if, because you're just never going to know. You know, rejection still hurts way less than regret. Yeah, correct. Rejection hurts less than regret, right? It's better for you to get a no and a fuck off, I don't care about you, I don't want to talk to you, I don't want to have anything to do with you, or not giving you the job. Like,
because you know.
Yeah, because you know. Because you were there, because you had the cojones, the balls to go in there and challenge the world, essentially. Challenge that, you know, like I said, the bitch that's throwing stuff at you 24/7. You were able to stand there and just shield it and just push through. And you came out on top.
Wonderful. A good feeling.
Yeah. I think it's time for us to wrap this one up, because you have things to do. I've got things to do. This was such a wonderful way to catch up. For sure, I'm going to have you back on here, and we'll catch up again. That's the whole spirit of it. And till next time, take care and safe flying.